All right. So I think we're all live, and we got a great crew here today. I'm looking forward to our conversation. We're going to let a few other people join here as we just brought up the stream. But we'll just give it a couple more seconds just to let these numbers go up. And I have to do a little bit. I'm going to bring up one more thing so I can prep. All right, so we got a couple people, and let's talk about our episode tonight. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our host tonight, Viscount Tristan. I think we got a great show tonight. Tell us what it's about.
Thanks, Brannos. Yeah, we do have a good episode tonight, and that is deciding when it's time to hang it up. And we're going to talk about this in terms of taking a temporary break from your fighting, maybe due to injury, maybe due to a job change or busy life, like a semi-permanent, and something like that may last only a few weeks, may last a month or two, up to more of a semi-permanent break that you have to take. And that also may be due to injury or real life. And then the third one is looking at permanently hanging up your fighting gear. And that may be due to any variety of reasons, but we're going to talk about the kind of the psychological effects on you looking at giving up something that you really love doing, and having to find some peace and filling in the space that the activity of SCA fighting leaves in you. So I want to welcome some people to the show. Sir Marcellus out of Caid, welcome. He's going to be joining us this evening. And Sir Cathal, I hope I pronounced that correctly, from Atenveldt.
Cathal.
Cathal, okay, great. Both of you, welcome to the show. Captain Sivrid is going to be kind of being our producer tonight. So thank you very much, Sivrid, for doing that for us. Let's start with kind of the basic, and I think this is something a lot of fighters, if not most of them, have dealt with, which is they get banged up and they're looking at, they got to take a month or two off of fighting, and they kind of get antsy. I know I was this way, and I had this happen several times, twice with like a pulled knee, once with a nerve pinch in my neck that made my left arm go completely numb. I had no strength in it. And boy, it was almost like being a tiger in a cage, just, kind of pace. I was antsy because what I found was that martial arts fill a certain part of me. And part of that was expressing the physical and the competitive realm. Like it normal life would bottle up an amount of energy, and that going out and fighting would allow me to dump it, like to give it a channel where I could go and do something very physical. It would take up all my attention. The woes of the regular world had to get put aside, or you're going to get hit in the head. So to me, it was like a moving meditation as much as it was I don't view that I was really a full-on adrenaline junkie, although kind of was. But there's just so many boxes that SCA fighting checked. It was an intellectual exercise. It was a physical exercise. It had the camaraderie aspect. Like, there was just a ton of things that it did. And when it was gone, even in the short term, there was an impact. Who'd like to comment on that?
I'll go ahead and go first. I have had some things like that happen too, where I have leg problems or knee problem, and you can't go out there and do everything that you want to do. You can't go to 2 practices a week. You can only you have to stay at home. You have to kind of recoup, and you don't have your friends around. And because basically anymore, all of my friends are in the SCA, and I really enjoy hanging out with them. And that's what I like to do, because that's what we do. And most of them are in the martial art, are in swinging sticks, and we're swinging sticks at friends, and I get a big kick out of that. And it's very hard for you to sit out for a while and know that you need to, you want to come back early. You want to come back, where, okay, I feel a little bit better, let me come back now, when you should probably stick out for another 2 months or something to really make sure that you're healed up, so that you can go ahead and progress the way you should be progressing. Those 2 months, everybody's like, well, what if I fall behind? Well, don't worry about that. We need you on the field when you're healthy. That's the key part.
Yeah, and if I can add a little bit to that, when I first started in the SCA, I was given a little piece of advice that your body's not designed to do what we do. It's not designed to take the impact. It's not designed to do the motions that we're doing. And as a young kid, I started fighting at 19. I was like, yeah, whatever. I am invincible. Well, as I got older, I found out that is just not the case. And boy, should I have listened when I was younger. But, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the SCA with this group, because I wouldn't have met them. And it really does open up a lot of things. And this is why we all do what we do and why we love it and why it's so hard to give it up. So I think that's the best way I can put it.
So Tristan, let's shoot back a little bit so everybody gets a chance to kind of know some folks here and kind of their background. And Tristan, you kind of covered yours and why you were a part of this episode. So Cathal, tell us, why did you want to come here today? What's your background?
My background, I am Sir Cathal. I got knighted in Onsteora and proceeded to move to Atenveldt about 8 years ago, and I've been a knight here for that long. And I am here this evening because during COVID, I had to have some surgery on my urinary tract, and they basically put a scope down there and told me that I've got the bladder of an 80-year-old. And if I get hit again, then I might have to have a catheter for the rest of my life. And so, knowing that situation, I decided about 6 months ago to hang it up. So I'm not going to be fighting anymore. I decided to go ahead and do something else. One of those things that I think I'm going to do is maybe do a little bit of rapier fighting. And the other thing I'm probably going to do is do a little bit more coaching and videotaping of the heavy guys. We always need somebody that will help out and do that. So I'm probably going to do that. So my heavy career is done, and I'm kind of struggling with that right now. So, and that's why we're here today, is to talk about those kind of struggles.
Exactly. So Marcellus, give us your background.
Well, I was started fighting in 1993. I was knighted in Caid in 2004 and had to retire technically 8 years ago, but I actually haven't fought in 12 to 13 years. In 1996, I was again trying to be invincible and made fun of the wrong guy, horse playing around. I slipped and he jumped to tackle me. I was maybe 5'7", 120 pounds. He was 5'9", 250.
Yeah.
He landed on my shoulders and it gave me a compression fracture of my spine. So over time, things heal in a weird way. And I went back to the doctor because I literally would put on my helm and my back would seize up. And so the doctor did another x-ray. They found some things that were wrong. And if I took a wrong shot in the wrong way, it could slip that vertebra and I could be paralyzed. And so he gave me a choice. I could continue fighting and take the risk or not. And I had to make the hard decision of not fighting. And that's why I'm here to talk about being a long-term young retiree in the SCA. And what I've found that I love is I found field heraldry. And I want to, I'll retake my test so I can also still marshal, and I still want to teach. So, but that's why I'm here today.
Awesome. Tristan, you kind of gave us yours, but you're still running a dojo, right? I mean, you're still.
Yeah. And this is something I wanted to really cover, I guess, more in the long-term hiatus, which was when I took my step back from the SCA, which was partially medical, partially personal as well. But I needed to find a substitute. I needed to find an outlet for doing what I really loved, which was teaching, working with students, helping them find what they loved about learning what they could really do that they didn't believe that they could do before. I found that merely being a competitor was not everything that I loved about SCA fighting or about the martial arts in general, because I've been into martial arts since I was, I think, like 11 years old. So, and I didn't find the SCA until I was 15. So that channel, the martial arts world, the SCA was just a part of that. And so when the SCA was not really part of my traffic pattern, I quickly filled it in. In fact, there was a little bit of overlap there where I was still going to practice and then going to martial art training, which that made for a tough schedule. But there was always that pursuit of how do I improve myself? How do I understand the martial arts better? How to I become a better practitioner, just broadly. And then I also shifted as well into teaching. So, which I'd been doing in the SCA anyway, but it's so informal that, it doesn't have the same parallel as it does in the traditional martial arts.
Well, I want to first just thank you for bringing us all together and pulling us together for Coach's Corner. So.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because this whole Coach's Corner project is part of my kind of replugging back into the SCA for what I love doing, talking with the people that I love talking with about a subject matter, which is becoming a better fighter, helping other people become better fighters. Just that's the realm that I really, really dug. And this was a chance for us to get together. And, I know from the audience's standpoint, we really got started shortly after COVID, but we started planning this before COVID was on anybody's radar. It took us probably 4 or 5 months worth of initial talks and chats and, hey, can we do this? And, well, I don't know, but it sounds like a good idea. And then COVID happened, and then things started to really foment. So the idea that Coach's Corner is a product of COVID, really it's not. It started before that, and COVID kind of put everybody at home and made them bored, and we were just happened to be there. Like it was the perfect.
It jump started it, yeah.
Timing.
Yeah, totally.
Perfect timing.
All right, Captain Sivrid. So you're our newest producer out there, but I asked you to stay on the show and tell us why.
So I started fighting in the late 80s and fought for about 20-25 years before I had to take a break because of the combination of family commitments, which were taking up every night, and career as I was new assistant professor looking to move towards getting tenure. Between those things, it completely took up all my time away from the SCA. And then for me, that took a 10-year break. And then during COVID, when everything started freeing up and my youngest had graduated, I've actually started coming back, and first was drawn back, just reconnecting with friends, actually through online Bardic first, and then also through getting in together with your online fighter practice, which is mainly drills at that point. So that's gotten back into things a little bit, and have been much more active and enjoying the fighting.
Awesome. All right, Tristan, back to you, and let's go ahead and get back to your topic that you were on.
All right. So the one we wanted to cover initially was the short term, and usually these wind up being injuries, but they can be things like, and I've known people that have gone through, and women who've gotten pregnant and had to take time off to go and have their child, or parents who have a child and now they have an infant and they just don't have time to do the SCA. So there can be just a myriad of reasons what pauses your activity level, and I've seen in people, some handle that pause very gracefully, and others just go nuts. They seem to, and I was kind of more in the second category. When I couldn't go fight, yeah. I was restless. I would be just difficult because of that outlet that I counted on just was not there. And if it's injury, well, I can't go play volleyball or go play, do something that is kind of similar. It's not really the same, but having a physical outlet, that even just that having no physical outlet at all, SCA fighting or not, was a psychological strain on me, I felt. Does anybody else felt that same restlessness?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just because I'm long-term retired doesn't mean I didn't take sabbaticals during that stretch where I was.
Oh, sure.
very, very active. And what always brought me back was the camaraderie. But I took a couple breaks for many reasons, whether it be, as everyone knows, politics in the SCA can get to you sometimes, and injuries and life in general. But there's always that draw. Like, I've been out of this for a long time, and what brought me back was the great fighters of YouTube, like with Duke Brannos, and the connection that you get. But during those breaks, it was either, just like Tristan, you said, it was either you really, really need it mentally and you're okay with it, or you're just like, I'm going crazy. But I also think sometimes taking a break is a good thing. It resets you. It cleanses whatever was having an issue. If it's not an injury, if it's an injury, you get to heal up, and those are very important. Taking a sabbatical sometimes is the best thing you can do, because when you come back, you have that love for the game again.
One thing I noticed, that having had a couple of breaks over my time, firstly, I looked at it being the impatient young buck that I was. I viewed it as being, okay, like we were talking about this before the show, is I'm falling behind. Like, my fellow peers are continuing to practice. They're getting better. I'm sitting here idle on the couch. By the time I get back, I'm going to be behind them. I'm going to be, having to play catch up, which, yes, that was part of a factor. You lose a bit of the physicality. But what I noticed about the second time I had to take a break was, when I came back, I was able to more easily approach it with a fresh mind. That is, to start to lose the bad habits that I was constantly reinforcing every week, because that was just how I would do it. It was like a cycle. And by taking a sabbatical, I could reset my mind to come back and say, I need to look at everything. I need to restart. I need to relearn fundamentals, refocus. And that helped immensely. And a number of people that I'd seen go through these breaks came back in an almost demoralized state, where they said, I'll never catch up. I can't, this is going to be really hard. And just in telling them, listen, look at this as a good thing. Look at this of you shedding these bad habits that you always did. Now is a time for you to renew, because your body's kind of lost a little bit of its memory of what you were doing. So use that to your advantage. Use reprogramming yourself now by training correctly the way you want to do it, not the way your body was always remembering to do it. And that usually picked people up pretty well, because we're always working, right? Even if we're in practice, we've been fighting at every practice for the last 2 years. You go to this next practice, you should still be working. You should still be trying. It's the same whether you've taken a break or not.
Well, and they've always stated that knighthood isn't the end of the journey; it's the beginning of the journey. I see fighting the same way. The journey in fighting as a beginner to where you're somebody like Brannos or Cathal, or you, Tristan, or Sivrid, we all hit those plateaus, and those plateaus can last forever, and they can really affect you mentally and physically. And sometimes stepping away gets you to refocus what your real goal in that is. And do you want to find something new, or do you want to try something new? It's always a good thing, in my sense. And I'm not trying to make it sound like my opinion is always correct, but if you take that sabbatical and you, as you said, Tristan, refocus on what you are really wanting to do, you come back a little fresher, a little ready to, and yes, you're gonna get your butt kicked for a while, but let me tell you, that's motivation all on its own. When I come back from a sabbatical, and I was like, oh, I just fought that guy 6 months ago, and I was kicking the crud out of him. What's going on here? You realize what you're doing wrong, and then you refocus it, and then you're back. You actually speed up more off that plateau, in my opinion, if you do decide to step away.
So, it's interesting, because we finally got a lot of discussion out there. And first, I want to thank everybody here in this group, because this is not a super easy subject to really talk about. And believe me, I'm struggling myself, knowing if I'll be able to continue or not. And right before COVID, and December before COVID is when I got a lot of bad news. And I had been pretty good around depression I dealt with when I was younger, because I had 32 years of doing something I loved and energy out into fighting, and my focus didn't allow me to deal with that other things. You know, mild depression is always part of everybody's life, but I really swam right back to that deep depression I was in when I was a teenager, and it was difficult. And there's paths through it. If that's back to the field, not back to the field, I still don't know personally, but I think, you know, there's a lot of people talking here, and in this specifically, Tristan, about this topic, and that is, you know, bad knees, bad back from a car accident. And I think a lot of people, they wonder, you know, can I make it back? And, you know, it's an interesting, because the topic we're on right now, or the subject you were just talking about, is what they call tunnel vision syndrome. And that is, you get so caught inside these lines of who you are that until you can break out of it, you can't see who you could be, and change and move forward, and maybe rediscipline yourself, you know, Tristan, refine that fun, you know, and those are the things that I think are important to talk about, because you know, I did a lot of research on this subject, and one thing that came out of every article I read was, you know, counseling. And counseling is talking, and that's what we're doing here. You know, we see a lot of people, they hit that and then they go away from the SCA. Well, I wish going away was probably the worst thing they did, because I have a feeling they had to deal with depression when they were away, and we don't know how deep that got. Right. And that's when it's scary. That's when we need to keep those people in mind, and reach out to them and talk to them and say we miss them, and invite them to things, because those kinds of things can actually be life-saving in times when people are very down. So again,
Brannos,
I want to thank everybody.
Brannos, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And let me be very clear. I thought we were just discussing somebody taking a short-term sabbatical. I wasn't thinking that the long-term effects of this are, as you state. I know that, and I know that this is an important topic to me, because I know you and I, Brannos, have been talking about it for about 6 months, and that I thought that this was a great venue and an important conversation to have, because you feel like you're alone when you make the decision to stop. And it does. I'm still dealing with those depression issues that have come from it, and I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've gained weight. I've done all kinds of things that aren't good for you, and I don't know if it's fully related to this, but I know it's partially related, and not being able to. I mean, I hear all the stories, you know, hey, remember when you did this, or remember when you did that? And yeah, I did. And it was, and you love it. You love hearing it, but I can't do it now.
Yeah, you love hearing it and you hate hearing it.
Yeah. So, and being somebody who has been retired for as long as I have, it's really, really difficult.
Yeah. So, you know what, let's, and I know Tristan's going to hit that topic. That's definitely one of our big topics towards the end of this. So I don't want your story to get broken up. You know, I want your story at the end, and we'll
because we started with the short term. I wanted to cover just one last thing that I think is kind of a positive about it, and that is, or rather helps it be not quite the heavy burden like you're talking about with the semi-permanent and the potentially permanent hiatus, but the fact that you know that your injury is going to go away. Like, it's a short-term thing. You like, okay, I got to take 2 months off, or let's say your job gets super busy, and you know that it's not going to be permanent. And so you know that the clock is ticking, and you're kind of impatient, but you know you're going to go right back to normal, or your whatever issue you're going to have is going to heal up, or you know, that makes it a little easier. And like what Brannos was saying about that mental track, that the tunnel vision you're in, it kind of keeps you in that tunnel, but you kind of like the tunnel. Like that's the tunnel that you're enjoying and you don't want to be out of it. But then that bridges us to, okay, now you've got a semi-permanent situation. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you have to take 2 or 3 years off. Maybe you and your wife or your spouse just had a child. You know that is going to be intensely, you're going to take up a lot of your time, or some other thing happens where you're not sure that, it's not going to be a short-term break. It's going to be a medium to longer term break, but you're not sure if you're going to come back at all. That to me is where the psychological burden really starts getting heavy. Where, because anybody can endure something for a couple of months and kind of shake it off, but it's another thing to go, am I ever really going to come back to this? Not sure. At least that's where I started feeling the weight of the loss of something that I really love doing, and the camaraderie and all of those things, was that unknowing factor. And it might be related to like the risk that you talk about. Okay, you can go do this, but if you do, you might be paralyzed for the rest of your life, or something of that nature. And you're balancing, okay, well, which do I do? And yours is, Marcellus, is a pretty extreme example. There are milder ones where, people have been told, okay, if you keep doing this, you're going to keep ripping your shoulder up or your neck or whatever, and you're going to be in pain. Maybe you're not hospitalized or paralyzed, but you're going to be in constant pain. And that's enough to make somebody decide, well, maybe I don't need to do this, or I shouldn't be doing this. And I think the hard thing about it is that it is very personal. The things that SCA fighting and participating in the SCA is a very personal thing to us. I think that's why it's kind of an elephant in the room. It's hard to face those things within your own mind, within the introspection, much less to talk to somebody else about it, and kind of share that vulnerability that you have of having to give up something that's fulfilling for you.
You don't want to be a little bit lesser.
Well, jump on. Yeah, I mean, let's go ahead and talk about that. I mean, you're the newest, right, in this scenario, and you're fresh at trying to deal with this.
Right, and I don't want to come off as, I don't have 2 crowns under my belt like Duke Brannos, and I don't have those titles, and I wonder, is any of these young people going to listen to me anymore? I've got stuff that I know how to do this. I know how to fight. I got really good at it, and but if I can't give it to somebody else, what do I do? That's really one of the nice things of last year. I was able to get my Squire Sean. He was made a knight in the past year, and that was a big thing for me. It was my first one, and he's a great guy. He's really wonderful, and he deserved it. And being able to teach him how to fight, and me and my wife getting his garb together, and and telling him, and he asked me, what more can I do? And I'm like, well, what have you picked an art yet? It turns out that he played guitar, and he went out and played guitar for the populace and showed everybody that he had an art, and that kind of thing is just, makes you swell and makes you proud. And I know in the future he's going to be a great knight, and it's going to be a wonderful thing. And but I wonder, as I'm going through this, am I, are there going to be other younger guys that are interested in me teaching them? I don't know. I'm not on the field. I can't show them.
Well,
I can't show them that.
I along with you, do not have the title that Brannos has or Tristan has. And I can tell you unequivocally that you're still a knight. Yep. And that's the thing that we have to get. We have to understand for ourselves. We have accomplished something that's not that easy to accomplish. Yeah, there are a lot of knights, but it's taken a long time to get those knights, right?
I agree.
And it took a long time to become a knight. And I can tell you, not just because you're my friend, and you are, and you're my brother, I have the utmost respect for you, always have, and I would always listen to what you have to say. And and the people on this show, I have the utmost respect for. Brannos is a hero of mine, always has been, and I always wanted to emulate him, and I'm doing everything I can to still to this day do that. And the people who would ignore advice from somebody like us, because if you think about it, we have an awful lot of fighting experience in this room. It's their loss. It's their loss. And we also have to realize we still have a lot to give. We still have a lot to give. And that takes the longest to understand, is you still have a ton to give. It's just a matter of figuring out how you do it.
You know, I'm going to throw this back at you, Sivrid, in a sec, because you had something about this. I just want to say it's interesting because Count Alert just posted almost exactly what you said, and so I was happy to see that. And you're right. You know, I was going to cover something at the end of this show a little bit when we get into positives, but I think we're kind of going back and forth. And you know, it doesn't matter all the titles, all of those things. One thing, no matter who you are, you've learned how to work as a team when we're doing, you know, melee. You've learned leadership. You understand coaching and goal setting, and you know, your personal accountability, and you're resilient and adaptable, and you got all of these great skills you learn from dedicating yourself to something. You know, those skills aren't gone. They're still all there, really. Right?
Right.
Sometimes we have to look at a different place where to apply it. But, you know, they're absolutely there. Somebody else mentioned it's like, and I can't agree with him more. I know some people that are retired because they fought 50 plus years and it's time, right? Mm-hmm. But man, those guys are the giants to me. Mm-hmm. they are the people I love to sit and talk to. And because, you know, I would, you know, I'd love to say, you know, I'm their peer, but I am not. You know, they're incredible. Do they fight anymore? No. Do they do other stuff? Hell yeah. Right. And so, yeah, I would agree. It's there's a lot more to it. So, Sivrid, we want to give you a chance to talk. What do you got?
Okay, yeah. So one of the things I was thinking about, so I stepped away from the SCA, and as a grant level fighter who was, you know, fighting pretty well and, you know, pursuing, you know, on the path. And so that's a hard step to make, just to say, okay, I'm going to step away. And I didn't know how long I was going to be away. I thought could be 1 year, could be 2. It ended up being 10 or 12. And so that was really kind of hard to say. Well, as I look back and I talk to friends and I see people from my fighter practices, you know, who would, as they were knighted and as they progressed along, that kind of, you know, left a kind of hurt, saying, well, everyone else is keeping going and I'm not able to keep going right now. And that was a little hard. But one of the things that really kept me, you know, feeling better about that was it was great to see these people getting and making the accomplishments they were making. I thought it was great for my friends to be doing all these cool things, and hoped that sometime I would be able to get back to that path. And so during COVID, when I stepped back towards doing stuff, it was really the people who I came back to. It wasn't necessarily the fighting first. It was the people first. And then it was after that, it was, okay, what can I do with my body now that's, you know, 15 years out of shape or 12 years out of shape? And slowly work that back into shape, and slowly work that into a point where I could actually get to be back to where I was fighting before. And I'm, you know, happy that I'm now fighting at, I think, a better level than I've ever fought. And so for me, that's a long-term recovery, but still at, you know, coming back and not knowing, well, am I even going to be able to keep up with everybody with all the changes in fighting in 12 years? That was scary to me, just to come in. And I think one of the things that helped a lot was the fact that, you know, I came in during COVID, which meant that I couldn't actually swing a stick, I could swing a stick at a Pell, but not at somebody. And so I had to do a lot of physical training that was just getting my body back to work and how I moved again. And so that helped a lot. But for me, it was, like I said, it was really, firstly, it was the people getting back into the people, and then it was then the joy of being on the field and being able to compete again. So
can I Sivrid, you are more of a peer than anybody in this room. To step away, and I don't mean to. Please, I hope I didn't insult anybody with that comment. But
No.
to take the strength to step away when you're as close to a goal as what you were looking for the right reasons, it is as peer-like quality that I have ever heard, and I want to give you a ton of credit for making a life choice in something that is we're all here because we love the game, and there's no doubt that you love the game, and stepping onto that field is always a joy, and you took it and you understood what you were doing and you came back with the same joy. I have to applaud you. And there's a comment in the chat by Tim Miller, I believe it was. Can I scroll back, Brannos?
Yeah, that's actually Counselor.
What?
Yeah, let me. We can put that right up for you. Let me.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I found it. Tim is right. There's a lot of talk about titles, and being titles shouldn't titles. There's a fighter is more than the title. You're 100% correct, Tim. I don't want anybody to think otherwise. But when you're retired, it's a different mentality. That's what the depression is you can't be that fighter anymore. And that's what we're talking about here. And that's why the title is a little important, because it gives you that strength to be able to feel like you can still walk up to somebody and have the ability to teach them. I don't know if I had to retire before I had my knighthood, if I would feel the same way. And that's the reason that we're using titles in that sense. You're right. It shouldn't matter. But as a retired fighter, for me, my title helps me teach. And it shouldn't, but it's what's in my head. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense of why we're using titles in this sense. Brannos, I'm sorry if I said that wrong, but
no, I know it's, again, there's nothing wrong in anything. Titles do help people some people look at those things. Somebody else commented is like that people look at those people. And one reason I think, Tristan, we get people on the show oftentimes with lots of titles is because they do carry some more weight. Most of them have been around for a long time. But in a show like this, having people that people look up to sometimes admit that they're afraid, or they're afraid they're not going to be able to do something again, or they struggle. A lot of people don't think they do. And we struggle just like anyone else. And I think it's, if they see that it's okay that we struggle, then it's okay that they're struggling too. And it makes it a little easier, hopefully.
Yeah.
I'd like to say something about titles too, especially that of being a knight. And I know that it is very common to think, oh, this must be the greatest thing ever to be a knight. It must be like super cool.
Yeah. Sorry.
Don't get me wrong. It's pretty cool.
To be honest. But there's the other side of the coin. And I know that not every kingdom has this in their knight's oath, but in the mid-realm where I was knighted, and North Shield took this on too, one of the parts was promising to be foremost in battle.
Yeah.
It's crushing, soul crushing, when you realize that you cannot abide by your oath. And yes, the teaching thing and the coaching thing and being a mentor and being, raising the next generation, all of that certainly applies. But that doesn't fulfill that one requirement about being foremost, being an ass kicker. Like a knight is expected to be a death machine. And when you can't do it, that becomes that adds to the heavy burden that knighthood is already. And now you feel like you can no longer bear the burden, or at least that aspect to it. And not saying that that's necessarily the right way of thinking about it, but it does influence your thoughts to say that at one time I was formidable and now I'm not. So
and that's very well said, Tristan. I mean, we don't have that as part of our oath in Caid, but I was told the reason I was knighted was because of my fighting. There was the other things. I could kill anybody in chess, and I can still do that. So be warned, I'm coming after you. I had the service, I had an art, but the reason I got knighted was because at the time I'm very small. I'm 5'7", and I was maybe $130, and I was kicking everyone's butt. And it was it was enjoyable. I can't do that anymore. And I can't tell you how hard that is. And at points, I know that somebody in the chat also stated they were thinking about turning in their peerage. I thought about the same thing. I had to be talked out of it. It's difficult, and it was well said, Tristan. That's all I can say. It's very well said.
Thank you.
So, Tristan, what's our next topic? I mean, this one's been deep, and we can spend a lot more time, but I think we will. And we're kind of
bridging. We've already started bridging into, all right, so now it's not just a short-term temporary. Now you're looking at a longer term. Now what do I do? Is this going to be, it's just now we're opening up more of the potential for that depression or the trying to find that hole that is now there because you're not able to participate. And at this point, I do want to plug, there's a book that I actually recommend to people. It's called Mastery, something like the Recipe for Success and Long-Term Fulfillment by George Leonard. It's a very short book, but it talks a lot about the psychology of, in very basic readable terms, of learning to understand yourself so that you can find what it is you're looking for. And this is written by a martial arts instructor. And so it's really in terms of a martial art practitioner trying to understand, okay, well, why do I have plateaus and how do I solve them? But all of this is wrapped up in exactly what we're talking about, which is you feel sadness for something that's missing in your life and you're trying to find what it takes to fill it. And the only way to do that is to really get to know yourself, to know what your other options may be, or how you're going to find that to fulfill it within yourself. And for those people that are thinking that, well, I used to be, a formidable fighter, and now I have to teach, and I really don't. That doesn't quite hit the nail on the head for me. Keep in mind, and Brannos and I both were blessed with he's slightly more than 30 years fighting. I'm slightly less than 30 years fighting. But I think about Capt, who was Mike Tyson's coach. He had one professional boxing match and he had to hang it up. So his record was 0-1. He lost that match, but he became a world famous boxing trainer that trained 2 world champions and had a whole host of coaches that went on to coach champions themselves, world heavyweight or world champion boxers. So the idea that, and I love doing this with people that say, well, the person's not a duke. Why am I going to bother learning from somebody that hasn't won a crown? Like, I want to be trained by the best, and that's all, right? Say, would you ever take boxing lessons from a guy who had an 0-1 boxing record? And of course, why would I? He's a loser. Like, well, that's Capt. And it turns out he was an utter genius. Probably designed the best boxing system there is. So to say that your worth is attached merely to what you were as a fighter, or are currently, maybe yesterday you were a great fighter and today now you're in a hospital and your doctor's telling you can never do this again. To say that your road is ended. Now, I think with somebody like Capt, he probably found his fulfillment in developing young men into their potential, and that's what filled the hole within him. It wasn't the boxing or the competing necessarily, although I think he viewed it as a competition, because when you coach a fighter, you are thinking in competitive terms. Absolutely. It's just a different thing than lacing up the gloves yourself. That
I
makes
think,
sense.
and I think you're nailing it there. You know, I think you're 100% right that he loved boxing, but
Mhm.
he took all of that love and you know, when he couldn't do it anymore, and put it into developing people, and
Yeah.
you know, not only in boxing, but as
Mhm.
you know, in personalities. And he had some very hard fighters to deal with,
Mhm.
especially as they got better and better. And it was amazing that he could manage those people with an 0-1 record, right?
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
But he took that discipline and applied it in a different way. And it's, you know, I'm going to call somebody out a little bit, and because he's on watching, and I'm gonna I it helps that I work for him, so it's and I know him, but I'm going to call out Tim Miller, who's Count Alaric. And you know, here's another guy. He's on sabbatical for, you know, not 100%. He still comes out, but not nearly as much as he used to. He puts 100% of that same effort he did into his work and into the people at his work, which is truly amazing. And you know, and you know, it's that same work. He's just found that place to help others in so many different ways. And you know, there's going to be a point he'll come back and do it. And I know he misses the game just like the rest of us, right? Or like you know, here's a person who's so busy can't actually even get out so much when he wants to. And it's not because he's hurt and he can't fight. It's just he just doesn't have the time. But you know, there's so many different reasons that we can't do the things, but that same focus and love you have for something can go in many different ways, and you have to appreciate the ways they do go, right? I have to learn to still appreciate that I teach people a lot, and it's a true love of mine. But tell you the truth, I tend to throw that out a little bit, right? You know, I cry when I can't fight because, you know,
Right. Yeah.
it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Am I past it?
Well, you miss it with something that you've been attached to for so long. You know, it's
yeah.
Well, this kind of bridges us into, and I do want to do this right now, but I think because we'll have enough time to get into it, get into suitable level of detail, and that is now you're starting to look at permanently hanging it up, and that may not be a firm choice given to you of you have to, you know, it may be something you have to contemplate over over time. Like it's not an absolute easy decision or quick decision to make. But the idea that maybe I'm done, maybe it's time to, you know, sell my armor, give it away, and I won't ever do it again. Now we introduce even a greater sense of loss, and a greater burden, and then finding creative ways of pursuing other channels that may not be as physically, you know, potentially damaging, or just finding another channel to put your energy into. And this is something that, you know, for me, I have a ripped up shoulder similar to Brannos's, and earlier on I decided, okay, I don't think I want to go down the surgery road. I already had it operated on once, and it was the worst mistake I ever made. But there were other considerations too, more of a personal nature, where it was sort of a large puzzle to figure out, all right, what's going to be the solution? And I didn't know what the outcome was, but it turned out like, okay, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And it was weird because I went through, you know, 25 years I never went more than a week without my armor being in repair, that I could get into it and go to practice or to an event whenever I wanted to. Like that was just my habit. It was like keeping my car running, you know, car breaks down, get it fixed, get it ready to roll. And so having to realize, okay, this is going to be a permanent separation was difficult. I would equate it to, you know, breaking up with a significant other. It was that emotional and personal. Having another channel was necessary, and I was lucky enough to have started it kind of as a crossover rather than go through the the separation part and then have to find somewhere else to channel my energies. But I think it's very hard when you build that habit, similar to me maintaining my armor and my weapons. You have that habit of finding an event every month or two to go to. You're going to practices every week. That's just your habit. And humans are habitual. We are habitual creatures. It is difficult for us to change a habit, regardless of how small it may seem or insignificant. It's not easy to give up those old worn-in tennis shoes or your favorite pajamas or whatever. All the way up to something that hits us as deeply as our fighting and our camaraderie within the SCA. We always, I don't know about you guys, but I always, look back with, yeah, those were great times. But you can't turn time back. And that's kind of the sucky part of reality is you can't go back to what was. You have to deal with what is. And that can be very difficult to ration your way through or reason your way through.
Hey, Sir Cathal,
Yeah.
How you, I mean, you're just coming back, out of COVID, learning all of this and now going to events.
Right.
How's that feel go? Have you talked to people about this a lot?
I haven't. You guys are the ones that I've talked to the most. I've talked to my wife a little bit about it. I've talked to my knight, Duke Lachlan of Onsteora. I talked to him a little bit about it. But I keep looking back and in my fighting SCA career and know that I didn't start until I was 35. I got knighted when I was 45, 46. And then moved to Atenveldt and did quite well there. I think I went, the farthest I went in Crown was like 6 rounds. Which not too bad, not too bad.
Yeah. No kidding.
And I thought I was kind of up and coming too. And that's when I met Marcus. But with this going on, I've had to basically not do any heavy fighting. And just like Marcellus did too, my weight has ballooned up. I've gone from 200 pounds to last time I weighed myself, I was at 247. So that's not good, but that just tells me I need to go hit the gym more. But those are things that you gotta work through, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do and where I want to go and how I'm going to do those things. Thank the Lord. My other knight, my first knight that I had was Duke Miguel from he was an Onsteora too, but then he moved to I think he's in Outlands now. He's up in Denver, and he was a rapier fighter, and he was in House Porto, which is, if you've ever been around the rapier field, you know what House Porto is. They're very much, very, very, very well known, and they're probably some of the best rapier fighters in the known world. And so now that I can't do heavy, I'm gonna go for that side of it, and we're gonna see what we could do over there. And the rapier community, I've just fought in Queen's Champion for last week. The rapier community has totally embraced me.
Awesome.
And they love that I come out, and there's so much love of they see a knight on the field and they're like, oh my gosh, a knight's coming over to play with us. And it's really nice to see that, and them wanting me to come over. And I'm really going to be happy over there. I think, even though I can't do the heavy things that I once did, I can still get on the field and do those things that I promised my kingdom to do when I took that oath, where I can, it just so happens is it won't be on the heavy field anymore. It's going to have to be on the light field. And, I'll have to be a hero over there and do those things and be a leader and do all those things that are expected of you when you're a knight. And that's what I plan on doing. that, and also I'm going to do all the coaching I can for heavy. I'm probably going to pick some of my friends, and I know that they're wanting to go for their crown, and maybe help them out. Whatever I can do, whether that's breaking down tape or videotaping or what have you. That's kind of how I'm planning on doing my thing, and hopefully that'll be enough to satisfy my. I'm very much a competition junkie. So I love to compete. I love it. I mean, really. I love competing, and it really does. It it really isn't about winning. It's just the attempt at it, you know. And I really love that, and hopefully the rapier community will let me do that too.
I think they will. They got a lot of great people there. It's been nice to get them more involved in the show. I don't know about you, Tristan. I know that some of our best shows have been with covering, with a number of mods on the show and reviewing some of the heroic show was really great. Lots of great talk there. So,
Definitely.
Marcus, I'm gonna hold you to the end of this one a little bit, but I want to just cover something just because I like adding a few things. There's, I think a lot of this, we talk about depression and that, what happens when you can't do something, and it doesn't matter. It's all these topics. And I found one article it's short, and I'm going to share a bunch of articles later in the forum here and in the comments when we post the show. But, one piece, and we can talk about these, is what we see is loss of identity. And I tell you what, I'm super concerned about that, and it's funny because I'll be the first one that people like you're going to lose identity, right? I think in some ways it's not that loss of identity outside, it's a loss of identity inside. Who am I now? Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of those places that's hard to deal with, and until you're in those spots, it's hard to understand, what somebody else is going through. So, and this what I want to make sure that that's the negative side of it, and there's work to get through those places, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. I'll share some ideas, but that's one of those things. I think Tristan and myself, we look at our that identity. Well, now we're pushing on, hey, we can help others just by talking like this, right?
Right.
And doing these things, and we can get people involved, and we can, motivate people still. We can be Kusamato, right?
Right.
And I think that's a big part. We talked about tunnel vision. That's the reason why I actually stopped on that subject when people started talking about it. We get tunnel vision into this is me, right? That the whole identity thing. This is how I want to do stuff. This is the way I want to live. I don't want to see anything outside that box. But look at there's rapier. Just because I have to right now, I do a lot of foam because my arm just can't. I'm in extreme pain otherwise. It's you have to look outside, and what I learned from doing foam is, holy shit, I should have been doing it for 32 years. It's stupid what we do. Mm-hmm. Right. And there are things when, even though we think we can't get out of who we were, when we lose and when we push ourselves past that tunnel vision, there's a tremendous amount of growth possible. So, take a hard look at some of that because it's still there and you still can find enjoyment. Is it going to be as enjoyable? Who knows? After 30 years of truly, absolutely loving something and maybe losing it, it's going to be hard to replace it with something else. But at least if you stack up some stuff or you find some stuff and you put that same effort you put into fighting and into that, I bet you get some enjoyment out of it. I bet you get the benefit of helping others tell you the truth, is probably better than just the benefit of helping yourself in the long run. But
could I share just a quick story on that?
Yeah.
And this actually happened to me years and years ago at an event. And my household and I, we went to this event, and they had a normal elimination tournament. And one of my housemates, and he'd only been fighting maybe a year and a half, quick hands, but not even a squire. And we were watching the attorney, and there was this Duke who was in it, and he was using the same trick on everybody, and he was walking through people, just one-shotting, one bang, bang, bang. And my housemate's like, oh my God, I drew him next. And so I walked over and I said, have you watched what he's doing to all these people? He's like, no. So he's just exhaling, letting them exhale, and then he hits them when they relax. Like, it's a simple trick. So I said, when you get out there, when you see him exhale, just throw the fastest shot at his head that you can. He's like, really? Yeah. So he goes out there and he one-shots this dude. And he comes back and his eyes are this big. He's like, I can't believe it. I did that worked. I said, well, as long as you know what's going on, to me, being able to kind of compete vicariously through him and then share his wonder, because he never would have bet that he would have won that fight at all, or even done well. He wasn't expecting to last more than 5 seconds, but to be able to be his coach, just even ring man, I guess you'd call it, for that moment, and give him a chance where he didn't have one before. Well, that was one of my magic moments, really. And it had nothing to do with what I could do as a fighter, a competitor, but as an analyst and a coach, I could help somebody, and it made his day. Like, he was on a cloud for a week after that. So to me, those are what you help fill the hole in. You're still competing. You're still thinking in terms of your fighter mind, analyzing and studying and applying. You're just doing it through someone else, and it's magic for both of you, I think.
So Marcellus, I'm going to throw a question we had in the comments at you, and tell us what you did here, because it's actually I like the question. So
I was thinking that might come I still have some dependents. What I have done, as long as how do I put this? We're still knights. I mean, we can still teach. I gave them a choice. Do you want to, I told them I can't fight anymore. I told them that I won't be on the field anymore, but that doesn't change the relationship that we have. I can always point you to somebody who I think can really help you. I have a whole bunch of friends who are excellent teachers, excellent fighters, who, if I walk up to them and say, hey, this is my squire, teach them some things, they'll get taught some things. The squire or dependent relationship, that's a true friendship. That's a commitment. And the times that you want to give up your dependence is when you've decided, I'm done with the SCA completely, that you are not ever going to come back. And I've had that thought too. Believe me, I've been gone for a long time. But you talk things out, because these people are your friends. Most of the time when you take somebody who is a dependent, in my opinion, it's not always the case, but you have a bond with this person. You have a special relationship. And being a knight squire or a mod and a student or a pelican and their I don't know what a pelican's apprentice. Thank you. Or a laurel and their I don't know the name of that either, but you get my point. It's a special relationship, and just because I can't step on the field and hit them with a stick doesn't mean I can't teach them how to do what I do or did. Is that answer the question?
I think that answers that question wonderfully. Thank you very much. But I'm going to turn it on its head for a second. Sivrid, I'm going to throw this one at you. What happens when you're when you're the dependent and you leave?
Well, that was in our case. We kind of left it open. I had already moved out of Kingdom. We had been away from each other physically for a long time when I stepped away. we still kept in touch a little bit, but not very much. And actually, during COVID is what we actually, got back together and realized how much we missed hanging out with each other. And so that was one of the things that drew me back, was the fact that I hadn't turned that belt in, that I hadn't given that up, was something, still a tie that was able to say, oh, there's something for me to come back to. And that was then a hook into everything else. It was kind of a foothold into everything else.
It is. I mean, I haven't seen one of my squires in years because he's in the Navy. If he came back today, it'd be the same hug that I gave him the day that I gave him that belt. To me, his accomplishments outside of the SCA are just for me to be as proud of as they are in the SCA. So I look at it in that sense. I would love to graduate one of mine, but they aren't as active as they are. But that doesn't matter to me. They're my friends. They're my confidants. And if they want to remain my squire and that's what they want to do, I am not going to stop them from doing that. If it makes them happy, it makes me happy. I don't see why there's an issue. Sometimes that's what somebody wants. They just want to be somebody's buddy, somebody's friend. And you can get a lot out of that. And there are a lot of people in the SA who thought I squired to Duke Ulrich. I was never squired to Duke Ulrich. He was just my best friend. And and I can see why people thought I did, because I was always with him. I was always a thank you, Colin. Love you, brother. Sorry, I saw
no, it's all good.
I was always with him, so I understood why people thought that, but I never did squire to him. He taught me a lot. I can't say that he didn't, but it's that kind of bondship that you get in this, and that's the hardest thing for me, being out as long as I have, is losing that. And like Tristan said, and everyone here, the great fighters of YouTube kind of drug me back in, and that was Ulrich again. It came down to Ulrich. He goes, you need to join this. And I said, what am I? And it's Cathal again. It came back to, what am I to give? I haven't been on the field. He's like, it's just there to shoot the proverbial, if I can cuss a little bit, shit, right. and talk about no shit. There I was comments. And so I got on this, and there were people I hadn't seen in years. Uther, Brannos, Ulrich, a whole bunch of people. And we started talking about fighting, and what made it good for me is people still understood that I had that knowledge and all that, and I could contribute to that conversation, because I was probably the only, at the time when we first started, the only non-Duke that was on that list, so it's kind of like, which one of these is not like the others, but the welcoming and the brotherhood that is always there is clearly something that I had missed for a very long time.
Well, I was glad you came back. I have to say, it was nice to reattach again and kind of continue. I think, it's funny, we talked about, we kind of pre-show this before we come out and make the show up. But we talked in the pre-show about COVID, was absolutely terrible. But, we saw so many people, so many friends driven away from each other because of many different things. But in a way, because of shows like this and Great Fighters of YouTube, Between Two Peers, all of these, Bardic stuff, Realm stuff, all of these shows, actually, it was interesting. I think brought a lot of people back together, and Marcellus, you're the one that brought that up. And
yeah,
and I think that was, as bad as we just saw the bad, because we don't celebrate oftentimes all the good, and there was some of that good in there. And I got the chance to work with Sivrid and his son. You don't know how proud Sivrid. I apologize for embarrassing you here. You don't know how proud I am of you and your son. As you know, in freezing cold garages every Sunday, pounding through stuff. And now, you know, it's funny at our TOC, you know, we watched you guys win tournaments, and, you know, Ronvalder and I were both just like, and I think it caught some people by, you know, they were a little surprised. They were like, why are you guys so happy? It's like, man, I'm just happy to see how good our guys are doing. We're so proud in that space, right?
Right.
And I think, you know, they think that, you know, all we're thinking about is the fighting and what we do, and it's absolutely not. And it's been interesting, and I think that goes back to, you know, what's next. And I think some of that is, you know, that same thing. Don't let those great people go away. You know, more people knock on their door, and you're helping them, and they can help you as well. You know, they helped you early off. They set that tone, and that they gave you the example of a peer or example of a person. It don't even have to be a peer. I know peers in this group. I was like, man, if I could do what they did, I would be a happy man. And I still see that.
Well, if I could paint, or like Colin, I don't know if you've seen some of his stuff, but man, is it gorgeous. And my stick figures are the best that I can do. And, you know, so if you wouldn't mind me delving into a little story, because I want to delve into that part of, you know, the issues that I have, and this is really hard for me to talk about. The reasons that I am no longer fighting are purely health reasons. It spiraled me in many different directions. You know, my outlet, luckily for me, was my kids, my boys.
Yeah.
And them growing up, but now they're at the teenage side of things, or an adult side of things. My son just graduated college. Dad's not as important. So now I'm going through it kind of again, you know, and I'm actually going back to an event for the first time in like 3 or 4 years again.
Awesome.
So it's a continuing cycle for me, you know, and it all the things that Tristan said, all the things that you said, and Cathal, what you're going through, I'm doing it again. You know, it's like I'm a glutton for punishment, but this is how much I love the game, right? So I wish that I could give some like amazing advice on how to fix all these things, but what I can tell you is the camaraderie and the love that people give back to you is as important as anything else that's in the game. And I'm nervous, I'm excited, but I'm also scared. You know, people are going to see a different me, but if they're truly supportive, they're going to love me anyway. Because and that's what we have to remember is, even though we want to be giants on the field, and I always still wanted to be a giant on the field, because believe me, I wanted a Duke in front of my name just as much as anybody else does. It'll be fun. It's been fun watching other friends like Brennan. I met Brennan and Colin in Von Dragonklaue 20 years ago, and they were young pups, and watching them grow and watching them become who they are has been a thrill of my life. And because when I met them, I was a knight, and they weren't. Now it's Duke Brennan, and it's gonna be Duke Colin soon, and that's a thrill, you know. Yep. And there's no way to get over what we're all going through, but you can use it to make the game better. Our experience, our love for the game, is always going to be there. And once you find that thing that you love again, you just throw yourself into it, like you said, Brannos, and you get through it, and you reach out. The biggest thing is now talking. I didn't really talk about being retired as much as I have lately. It's very difficult. I'm still choking back tears right now. But I know that there are people out there just like me, and they're there to support me. And that's the biggest thing. Like I see that Bess has been on there, and we've had some PTSD questions.
Yeah, let's talk about that one.
Okay.
I think we did have it wasn't so much a question as I think a comment.
It was a comment on having PTSD and being afraid to come back. It's a valid issue. You get hurt doing this game. It's a violent sport. Let's not beat around the bush about it. What we do is violent. It is not for the timid. But somebody who's gone through it and been hurt and wanting to come back, I completely understand the PTSD side of it. I tried to fight through literally not being able to feel my legs for hours on end to do this. And I don't call what I had PTSD. I really can't. But I can say that coming back from an injury like this in this game and fearing you might do it again, that's as valid as it comes, and that needs support. And I would say to that person, you need to talk about it. You don't be afraid to talk about that, because the more you'd be surprised how many people probably feel the same way, and they can support you and help you get through that part of it. And it's valid. We have to remember that these issues are valid. We can't, as human beings, we always, oh, I have PTSD. Oh, really? Do you really? No, we can't do that. It's real. It's real for anything. Can be real for anybody, and we have to support that person and listen to what their fears are, because it going out on my biggest fear as a fighter, I'm about to admit something a knight probably shouldn't admit, but I'm going to admit it anyway. I was petrified of war fighting, like petrified. I was afraid I was going to get hurt. I was afraid I was going to get crushed. And I have to give all the credit in the world to Count Franbolt in Atenveldt. I was at an Australia war, and he was behind me, and there was a rush on a bridge battle, and he pushed me once, and I charged through it, and I didn't get hurt. I was like, this is awesome. It was all Franny, who was all. Franny's got a weird. If you know Franny, he can poke your buttons really well, and he loved poking my buttons. Probably still does, but he did more for my fighting in that day than a lot of people can, and that's because he didn't give up on me. And when people have PTSD, we can't give up on them. We have to talk them through it, help them get through it. And who said that? Listen to someone talk about it is JJ. As Brannos said, that's exactly what you want to do. Listen, if they want the help, you give it, but you need to talk about it, and you need to be open about it, and we need to be receptive to listen to it.
Yeah, I think listening is the biggest part of that. Is that people want people to listen, and I think that's what we're trying to do. In a way, this is that whole counseling part of recovery, and I'm happy we did the show. So Tristan, I think we got like 15 minutes, or actually 10 minutes left, and you had at least one more topic, and I'd like to just cover a couple of things that we actually covered in the show, and I just want to show people that we covered them. But let's go.
Yeah, the last one, and this was brought up among the coaches, was what is the decision-making process for determining whether or not you should hang it up, or or maybe even just take an extended break. That alone can be a consideration of, do I need some time away, to whether it's not necessarily just an injury thing, but maybe it's a personal matter, or it's some kind of a PTSD type emotional based problem that you're facing, that you need to kind of get your head out of the clouds into fresh air for a while to have some introspection time. And this is something that I personally went through. I put myself on a year-long quest quite a few years ago, just to get that fresh air and find out what I was wanting and what I was needing. And those are two different things. Also, remember, there's what you want and what you need. You can get everything you want and be short of what you need. So the answer for me of that decision-making process came into, I guess, what Sun Tzu would say, know yourself. Find out what's in you that is not being fulfilled, or that needs to be fulfilled. And that can take some time. It's not like you're going to sit down on a weekend and get it all sorted out. So I guess that would be my recommendation. Again, and I would say read that book, Mastery by George Leonard. That is a game changer. I've given that to people and it has changed their life. They've come back to me and said, this is the best book I've ever written. It only took me like 2 hours, but it made me look at myself in a whole different way. So that would be my recommendation for the decision-making process. I'm sure everybody's got a unique take on it as well.
I raised my hand as soon as you asked the question, because I have been down that road 7 times now. The decision making, the decision is the hardest. I'm not gonna pull punches. It's the hardest. One of the hardest. I can't say it's the hardest. It's one of the hardest decisions you will have to make. But you have to make the decision for yourself. If you make the decision that you need to retire, you are making the decision for yourself, and no one should question it. No one should question it. It is personal. It is heartbreaking personally. It is sometimes devastating. But know that you made the right decision. No matter what anybody else says, you are making the decision for you, and you are making the right decision. And if somebody gives you lip or grief, they're wrong.
Yep, because it's your decision.
It's your decision. And I have more respect for people who make that decision, no matter what their reason is, because they made that decision. And I know that sounds kind of weird. You're like, oh, what if somebody made a decision because they just don't like it anymore? Well, guess what? It's their decision. I made the decision for a health reason. Sivrid, when he made his break, did it for work reasons.
Well, and a family reason, right?
And family. And Cathal's doing it for health reasons. There's always a reason behind it. And just because somebody doesn't come out and say it, because this is, I think, the first time a lot of people are hearing this from me, there's a reason that I left. And it wasn't because I didn't love the game. I do. I miss it all the time. But I had to make the decision for me. And I wanted to be able to pick up my kids.
Yep.
And raise them without the fear of not being able to walk again.
Totally agree.
And
so,
yeah, sorry.
Did somebody else have a?
Yeah, I'll go too. The decision, the other thing that happens when you make this decision that I find is this: I have to make the decision all the time. Okay, I have to remind myself why I did it and why I made that decision. I'll tell a little story here. Crown last weekend. Saturday, I'm sitting there and I'm watching the fighters, and I'm just dying, and I want to be out there so bad, and I want to be out there fighting for my kingdom and fighting for that throne, and I want to do that. And then I sit down And then I look over at my wife and I realize that, hey, maybe I shouldn't do that. You know, I want to be with her. I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to make a bad decision because it's something I want rather than something I need. I'd rather make a good decision and say, you know what, for the best, I'm going to go do some other things, even though I'm dying inside when I'm watching the other guys out there fight.
Yeah. I get that. So Tristan, I think we're about 5 minutes to the end of the show. I got a couple things I want to bring up some points that we did cover in the show, because I think the one points I wanted to bring up is some of, where do we go next? When we covered a lot of this, why did we make the decision? The decision's ours, and where we go next, and reading some of the specific things about depression through losing your sport. They talk about reducing your exclusiveness to your identity. And I think we covered that, right? I think we looked and said, fighting isn't the only thing we have. And I think that's, I want to make sure people know that's how we help, and how do we help get out of depression. It is so hard to go back and I'll lie to you. I'll be lying to you if I say I already did all these things, because I absolutely haven't. And just like what was just said, I struggle with what I have made, and then the next day I'm like, no, I can't give it up. It's progress, but we talk about that. You have to take a look at these things to get you past that depression, and it's a fight. I mean, but you know what? We're all fighters. Everybody that came here to this thing came because they want to hear, and they that whatever they did, if it's fencing, archery, anything, I don't care what you're here for. You did it because you have a passion. You loved it this much. And you're coming into the show because you have the same feeling we all do. So, it's we have to get through these. He's like, the second point is discover other interests, right? That's where we absolutely talked about that. Other other things that maybe you gave up that you did like because you got caught up in fighting so much that you gave up the things you loved before. They're still there, stress management skills. Stress management skills are there because for me, a lot of that stress is released in fighting. But it can be released in workouts. It can be released in lots of other ways. And you have to find those skills to be able to manage that.
And there are a lot of ways to compete.
Yes.
You're a competitor. It's not that you need to be top physical game.
As I said, I'm coming for you all for your chess game.
Oh man, good thing I just read The Art of Learning, man. I'm all good.
I'm coming for you all.
And we talked about this one, and we're trying to do it. Encourage strong relationship with coaches, family, friends, managers, so people you can talk to, right? Mm-hmm. Because they really do want to support you. Don't walk away from them. Don't hide stuff from them. Because to tell you the truth, they're the ones that are going to help you when you start make a bad decision. They're the ones like, you sure you want to do that?
Right.
Right. And here's that last one I keep talking about, and that is, here they say find a sports psychologist, but explore venues to talk about it is what they're talking about. And that's what we're here for. Right. And those are the big five. Almost every article I read, that's what they came down to. Those 5 things. There's ways out. Is it going to be fun? No. Will you always miss it? Yes. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt. You will always miss it. Can you find other ways to be fulfilled? I think you can too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, all right, Tristan, all you.
Well, yeah, I wanted to thank everybody for joining us on the show tonight. This has been a very thought-provoking discussion. I really enjoyed this one. Coming up next week, actually, this kind of bridges into next week's topic, which is the emotional cost of fighting. And what does that mean exactly? We're going to talk about the description of is believing in yourself, your prowess, your training, and getting past the fight that's letting go of loss and failure. So one of the things I think that we've all talked about here is that fighting is an emotional thing for us. We are drawn to it for a passion. It's not like, just some mechanical action we're taking. There's emotional investment in it. And with anything emotionally, and you're emotionally invested in, and something doesn't go right, it can be like acid to you. It can be painful. So we're gonna get into that as well. So I guess if anybody has anything to wrap up with, go right ahead. But so far it's been a great show.
I just want to offer anybody who has any questions about being retired or thinking about it and you need support, I'm always here. I'm an old retiree, get off my lawn type guy now. So, but I'm always here to support. And I want to thank Brannos and Tristan and everyone here that for inviting me and letting me, help some people out. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you, Marcellus, for coming on.
Yeah, I'd like to utter those same sentiments. Anybody out there, my name's Clint Gallen on Facebook. Ping me on there in Messenger. I usually respond easily. If you need to talk to somebody, any of that, I'm there for you. I love this game. I love playing it. I have now for almost 20 years. And anybody has any feels like they need to talk to somebody, give me a call anytime.
All right. Well, Sivrid, thank you for producing again. Tristan, thank you for hosting again. You guys were great. And we know it was a touchy subject. I hope everybody got a little bit out of it. Big heart out to you guys. I'll do this. Maybe I'll do this right. There we go.
That it?
We'll
Yeah.
800.
We're fighters. We're fighters. We don't
Right,
Right. Yeah,
Where's my stick?
We'll send the 800 number out later for support. And otherwise, everyone, try to have a good weekend. And thank you for coming out. Thank you for the wonderful discussion. What makes this whole thing even better is when people talk like this and people can be open and people can share. And I see that every week in the forums, and it's been wonderful. Once again, I hope everybody hits our website, hits our YouTube, follows all of the stuff that's going on out there. The discussions have been great this week. We have so many great coaches and trainers out there bringing up subjects to talk about. Don't miss it. And we'll see you next week.
Have a great night, everybody.
Have a great night.
Good night.